Good morning. How is everybody this morning? Well, now, you know that's a matter of opinion. we're working hard. Well, it's good to see everyone. Have you had a good week? That's wonderful. That is wonderful. All right. The rain. Yeah. Yeah, the rain messed up my Saturday and my Friday. That's all right. That's all right. But, be turning your Bibles to Genesis chapter 12. We're ready for that. Any announcements that we need to make? All right. I can't think of any. Be sure and stay afterwards, because we're going to have, the kids call it church eat church. And we're not having church eat church today. We're having church eat. And so want to remember that. And of course, there will not be a 6 o'clock service here tonight. And so be mindful of those things. But Genesis chapter 12, we began now with the story of Abraham. And Abraham was very important to the Jewish race, to the Jewish people, and in the line that God is going to carry out for the salvation of mankind. Abraham, in being a good man, also made mistakes. Now, we could talk about how that Abraham lived by faith and how that Abraham was an unselfish type person, and how that he was, we're going to see today, he was thankful and he was godly. But you got to also remember, Abraham was flawed. Abraham was flawed. And that's true of everybody in the Bible, to be honest, except, of course, for the Trinity, if you will. Back a few years ago, for Father's Day, when I was preaching at Pomona, I preached on Eli and the story of Hannah and Eli. And I preached on Eli for fathers. And I had a lady that walked out, a visitor, not a regular member. Lady, matter of fact, I don't think I'd ever seen her before, and if I've seen her since, wouldn't know it. And she walked out and she said that was a poor example to pick for Father's Day. And she just kept walking. She didn't tell me why. And, I got to thinking about it. And, of course, maybe she didn't like the sermon, and I can appreciate that. But I pointed out his good traits, tried to leave his flaws behind. And the reality of it is as I've thought about that woman, and, a bad time to really hit the preacher is when he's just finished a sermon, because he's all hyped up anyway. But hit and run is not the way we Christians should treat one another. Anyway, she hit and run. She hit and then ran and didn't want to hear me ask or say anything. But I've thought about that because I've thought about it from the standpoint of, yeah, he was flawed, but who wasn't? And Abraham, we will find out, is flawed. And so while we lift up Abraham as a great man in many respects, we'll try to also point out his flaws, and we'll talk about them. One will come up today if we get that far, and I hope we do. But let's understand that he's human like the rest of us. And so while we lift him up as a great man of faith and piety, let's also remember that he's human. And so let's begin now. Abraham, God's going to make an agreement or a promise to Abram, as he calls him right now. We'll see, of course, a changing of his name to Abraham. And so if I call him Abraham, we know who we're talking about. And if we call him Abram, we know right now, at least in the stories we're going, that's who we're talking about. We're talking about the same one person. The Lord said to Abram, get out of your country, from your family, and from your father's house, to a land that I will show you. And I'll make you a great nation. I'll bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you. and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Abram, or Abraham, was a man that evidently, just like Noah, found grace in the eyes of God. Abram became the father of all nations, if you will. Abram was a man, though, that God said, get up and go to a different country. Now, I want you to think about that in conjunction with several things. We don't know religiously what Abraham was at this point in time. Matter of fact, it's kind of interesting. I went back and tried to pick out some things, and there's a passage in Joshua 24 that makes a statement in verse 2 that talks about Abram's fathers being idolatrous people. And so it's very possible that Abram was the same way, that he was an idolatrous person. And if that be the case, my wondering, and I have no answer for this, is how God got his attention. But I think that's interesting from the aspect of God comes to Abram and says, okay, I want you to get up and I want you to leave. And of course we know the rest of the story. We know that he does. And so we're not telling you the end that you don't already know. But I want you to think about what God has done at the very beginning. He has called Abraham to sacrifice. Now, some of you probably still live within 30 minutes of where you were born. And that's fine. That's wonderful if you do. Some of us don't. And that's all right too. I know of families that the parents have built a house, and one of the daughters has built a house upon the property, and the other daughter says, I'm 50 minutes away, and that's almost too close. So you understand how it goes. God tells Abram, I want you to leave, and I want you to leave your country. I want you to leave your family. I want you to go. The sacrifice. He's leaving what he knows. He's leaving what is comfortable. And he's leaving his family. And I want you to go from your family and from your father's house, and I want you to go to a land that I will show you. So guess what? Pack up your bags. You don't know where you're going. Now, I think I've alluded to the fact I've had people tell me through the years, well, I'm going on vacation this week. Great. Where are you going? Don't know. And I usually look at them and I say, that's not true. And they say, no, I don't have any reservations, don't know where I'm going. And so my question then to them, and it always stumps them, is, well, how do you know when you get to the end of the driveway in the morning which way to turn? Oh, well, I guess I do have a general idea of where I'm going. Yeah, we usually do. May not know the specifics, but we have a general idea. Abraham had no idea. God said, pack your bags. Pack your bags. Don't know where you're going. I'm not telling you yet. But he says, I will give you and I will show you where you're going, and I will make you a great nation. Here's the promise. If the commission is found in verse 1 to go, the promise is found in verse 2. Here's why you're going. Because I'm going to make you a great nation, and I'll bless you, and I'll make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I'm going to make you a great people. I'm going to make a great land. And not only has he promised this, but he says, I'm going to bless you, and you'll be a blessing for everybody. Now, that's hard to turn down, or should be. A godly man would say, what can I do to help others? How can I help others? How can I be of assistance to others? And we often don't put others where we should in line in our life. It's usually, okay, we'll put God first, but then it's me, and then it's others. And that's really not the way God wanted us to put. God wanted us to put, of course, him first, but put others second. Abram has to think about, okay, You're going to bless me. You're going to make my name great. And I'm going to be a blessing for everybody. I get to serve others. And one of the great earmarks of the millennials, while the millennials that we often talk about as being self-centered and so forth and so on, being religious from the standpoint not religious, one of the great earmarks, though, of the millennials is that they believe and appreciate in service to others. And so this is what Abram found to be a blessing. And God goes on and he says in verse 3, I'll bless those who bless you. So Abram becomes a means of a blessing. But think about the promise here in verse 3 is the protection of God. God says, those that bless you, he says, I'll bless those that bless you, I'll curse those that curse you, and in all the families of the earth shall be blessed. So God assured Abraham, I'm going to protect you. Now, let's go on for just a few minutes, if you don't mind. Look at verse 4. Look what happened. Abraham departed. Now, here's the question. When? Don't know. Did he pack up his bags and go immediately? Of course, admittedly, a nomadic type person doesn't have many bags, much stuff to pack up. It's not like us. And he says, Abram departed. But notice that it says, as the Lord had spoken to him. Now, you can take that in one of two ways. You can take that as Abram departed while the Lord was speaking to him, or he did it in the way that the Lord told him to do. And I'm not sure which way is best or the right way of saying it. But Abram departed as the Lord spoke to him. And notice that we're going to have a little bit of parallelism here in that he's going to say it and then he's going to say it again in this paragraph. But he takes his brother's son. We find out in verse 5 he takes Lot. Lot went with him. Lot was his nephew. And it tells us that Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. And Abram took Sarah, his wife, his nephew, Lot, his brother's son, and all their possessions that they had gathered. Now I want you to notice something. Look here. And the people whom they had acquired in Haran, and they departed to go to the land of Canaan. This was a man that had means. He had servants. He had possessions. He takes at least a little bit of family with him. He takes his wife. He takes his nephew. And notice that it says, verse 6, he passed through the land to the place of Shechem, as far as the terebinth tree of Moreh. This is probably, some say, an oak tree. We really don't know, but it's probably, I forgot who said this. I think maybe Duckwood said it. This was probably a landmark. And so that's why this is mentioned. The word Moreh, as is found in the last word of that sentence there in verse 6, as translated in New King James, means one who teaches. And so that's why a lot of folks think that maybe it was a place. And the Canaanites were then in the land. And so he leaves. Let's go on. Let's get 7 and 8 and 9, and then we'll open it up. So then the Lord appeared to Abram, and here's what he said. To your descendants I'll give this land. And there he built an altar to the Lord who had appeared to him. And he moved from there to the mountain east of Bethel. He pitched his tent with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And there he built an altar to the Lord and called on the name of the Lord. So Abram journeyed going on still toward the south. Do you notice something that occurs in two places? He built what? He built an altar, right? A place of worship. Now think about, especially as he goes to Ai and there he builds an altar. He's building these altars among pagan people. He's building these altars as places of worship, places where he could give thanksgiving for what he's received and where he is, what's going on. And that's one of the interesting things about Abraham. is that seemingly you could mark his trail by going to find the next altar. And if you could find the next altar, you could have said, or you would have said, well, Abram was here. You remember those old things, Elvis slept here and so did this here. And, this is where Abraham was. Abraham was here. He built an altar and he thanked God for it. What's the lesson that it teaches us? How about once in a while we need to put down markers in our life? Whether literally or figuratively, we need to put down markers in our life and thank God for where we are, for what's going on, what we have. We don't thank God for our yards when we're mowing them because we're hot, we're sweaty, we're tired, and thinking we could do something else. But we ought to thank God for them. We don't thank God when we're in the kitchen cooking and sweating. I read something this week. It said 2 hours worth of work for 30 minutes worth of eating. Is it worth it? Yes, it is. Yes, it is. But we don't thank God while we're doing that 2 hours worth of sweating. Why? Because it's hot and we're tired and we want to do something else. We want to go in and watch TV. We want to be like the other person in our house that's sitting there watching TV and not helping us. We want to be like them. And maybe we should put down, maybe not literally, but figuratively, an altar to God, if you will, and say, thank you for what I have. On and on we could go with that. But I think that's the great lesson to learn in that. And so, 2 lessons. Abram goes, does what God tells him to do, and he thanks God as he goes along the way. Anything else or something? Yeah, but at the same time, too, of course, you got to think about it in several terms. If you have great possessions, you're right. You got to get all your stuff together, and so that's going to be rough. But you also got to remember he was probably a nomadic person, so he was used to traveling. So he didn't unpack too much stuff, so to speak. So I don't know the answer, and I'm proposing problems, and I realize that. But it's an interesting thought. And so, yeah, I tend to want to think that it took him a few minutes to gather up his stuff. But I can't prove that. So.
In the verse or chapter 11,
Yeah.
they headed to Canaan, stopped at Haran, and said, "Don't tell why they stopped."
Right.
There. So like God had called twice.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we don't know how long that was. So we don't know whether he unpacked that then.
Right. Yeah, because it became evident this week. Suzanne wanted something, and I said, I don't think we ever unpacked that because there are certain things we just chose not to unpack, just out of laziness, I guess. And she wanted something. I said, I don't think we unpacked that. So I don't really know where it is. So, yeah, who knows? I don't off the top of my head, Billy. I don't know. I don't think it's given. Yeah. That's the reason he could. Yeah. Yeah. Remember, this is the beginning of what we call the patriarchal age, really. And that just simply means father rule. So, yes, that's what I think. Anything else? Good questions, good points. There was a famine in the land, and Abram went down to Egypt. Why would he go down to Egypt? Egyptians are always prepared. That's a good point. What runs through Egypt? The Nile River. And it was a fertile, it's part of the Fertile Crescent, and it's fertile land. And so, like Jay said, they seem to be prepared all the time because they could be. It's sort of like my brother-in-law and his father and grandfather, they've had, now somebody else works at for my brother-in-law, but they have had land in West Tennessee, and they had really good land. And I'll just give you, for instance, that these numbers, don't quote these numbers, but if, let's just say, if your land would produce, say, 10 bushels of corn to the acre, theirs would produce 20. They always had, really great harvests. Well, that's the way, if you will, down in Egypt. And so they go to Egypt because of the famine. And verse 11, it says, and it came to pass that when he was close to entering Egypt, he said to Sarah his wife, now here comes a plan. And this is where we find out Abraham doesn't always do what he's supposed to do. Indeed, I know that you're a woman of beautiful countenance. Therefore it will happen when the Egyptians see you that they will say, this is his wife, and they will kill me. But they'll let you live. Please say you're my sister, that it may be well with me for your sake, and that I may live because of you. Now, here's the question. Was that a lie? Half lie. Why? Why only half, if you will? Half sister. Yeah, half sister. So you say, well, it's not a lie. Well, it is a lie. Why would this be categorized as a lie? That's the best answer I could give you, because it's not true. It's intended, it's given to deceive, right? That's really what a lie is. It's a deception intending to lead someone in the wrong direction. And that's really what they were doing. Now the situation ethicist sits there and says, well, the situation dictates it. It's all right. And it was all right for him to tell that because, they'd take his life. But the Bible says don't lie. Don't sit there and try to deceive someone, lead them astray. Don't tell them things that are untrue. Now, sometimes we hold back the truth, not trying to deceive people, but sometimes there are things that say, I know that you don't need to know. I haven't done this with Jay and George because I haven't had to, but in working with other elderships, I've had to explain to especially new elders that I am the minister for the whole congregation. I'm not just your minister. And it's taken me a while to teach, train, get these folks to understand that. And so they said, well, what does that mean? And I said, that means that sometimes I'm going to know some things that you're not going to know, and I'm not telling you, because that's between that person and me. They came to me in all confidence to tell me what they needed to tell me. They shared with me part of their life, and they don't want you to know. Now, it's important that we keep those confidential things confidential. I had a woman come to me once and tell me something. And she said, I've only been to one other person, and she told me who it was. It was one of the elders. Not of this congregation. Not this congregation. And she said, and I would prefer no one else know about it. I said, mum's the word. About 3 weeks later, church was having a fellowship meal, and I heard someone telling this individual's story. And I turned around, and it was this elder telling everybody, and not just telling the story in vague generalities, but calling the individual's name. And I couldn't believe it. But sadly, I could believe it. Now, I will tell you this, and I don't have a dog anymore, but back a few years ago, I had an old dog, and when he died, I told some of the members, your secrets are safe because I'm not telling anybody, except I did tell my dog, and he's not telling anybody anymore. So they felt better. Sometimes every once in a while, a preacher got to have somebody to talk to, so he goes talk to his old dog. But there are confidentialities. Now, those things need to be kept confidential. And there are times, sometimes, when we panic people over things. We stir the pot when we do well to keep our mouths shut. Abram's problem was not trying to stir the pot. Abram's problem was, I don't want anybody to kill me. And if they find out that you're just my wife, well, they'll kill me. So let's do this half-truth. And so it was that when Abram entered Egypt, the Egyptians saw Sarah, saw the woman, and saw that she was very beautiful. And the princes of Pharaoh also saw her, commended her to Pharaoh. And the woman was taken to the woman was taken to Pharaoh's house. I'll get it right in a minute. Now, I want you to remember that Pharaoh, this was a common practice amongst pharaohs, that if they saw a woman that they liked, they brought her into what would in essence be part of his harem, part of his treasure trove. And so the princes of Pharaoh, those that, if you will, were his underlings that worked with him, they saw this woman and they went to Pharaoh and they said, hey, there's a lady just came into town. Man, she's pretty. She's beautiful. Pharaoh said, well, go get her. Verse 16 says he treated Abram well for her sake. He had sheep, oxen, male donkeys, male and female servants, female donkeys, and camels. So Pharaoh gives Abram these goods. Now, not to say that Abram didn't have already, but Abram now all of a sudden is really blessed. And the Lord plagued Pharaoh in his house, and the great plagues came because of Sarah. And Pharaoh called Abram and said, what is this that you've done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say she's my sister? I might have taken her as my wife. Therefore, here's your wife. Take her and go your way. So Pharaoh commanded his men concerning him and sent him away with his wife and all that he had. And so Pharaoh is upset. And Pharaoh sends Abram on, and so Abram is not where he needs to be from God's standpoint. Now, when you look at this, you find out that there's really two problems that Abram has here. There's lying, deception in order to cover a truth. But I want you to think about something else. I want you to think about what Abram really didn't think about. And that was that God was going to protect him. In other words, God told Abram, he says, I'm going to get you to a land, I'm going to get you to a country, I'm going to get you to where you need to be, I'm going to bless you, and I'm going to take care of you. And already we've seen what? He didn't really trust the fact I'm going to take care of you. Sarah, let's make up this story. Let's concoct this story so that I'll be all right. Now, I will say this in saying what I just said. God's protection of us requires God, but it also requires us as well. Now, what do I mean by that? Do I believe God protects me? Yeah, oh, you better believe it. I've seen too many things in my life that says that God protects me. But I have to do my part as well. You see, if I believe that God completely protected me, I wouldn't look both ways when I went out into the street. And when I walk to my mailbox, walk down my driveway and walk to my mailbox, I get there and I stop on my road and I look both ways and I make sure that either Christy or Stephanie's not coming because I think they speed up. I was there one time and Stephanie was coming this direction, and she said, I slowed down for you. I said, the motor tells different. But I look both ways. Does God protect me? Yes, but he also gives me enough good common sense to say, look out. So, I protect myself that, knock on wood, my health, in 59 years I've been alive, my health's been really good, to be honest. And I've really been blessed. And I'm thankful for that. But if really sick, go to the doctor. Now, my doctor gets a little mad at me because I self-diagnose, and I usually, because I've had good health to this point, I can pretty much take care of myself. And so when I go for my yearly physical, he'll say, well, what happened this year? And I tell him, well, what'd you do? I got tickled one time. I told him something that really was probably bad, and I probably should have gone to the doctor, and I told him what I did, and he said, well, that's what I would have done too. So, I did the right thing, thankfully. And so we have those issues in life. But God's protection of Abram was such that Abram simply didn't completely believe that God would somehow take care of him. And you might say, well, that was then his means of protection. Yeah, but he went about it the wrong way. He lied. Now here's an interesting thought, just to put in your head and to really confuse you. If this lie is considered a sin at this point, that means what? Okay? But it means that there was a law that we do not have. What was the moral basis for saying the lie was wrong? Until you get to where? Exodus chapter 20, right? The Ten Commandments. What I believe is that since God did this, that there probably was some sort of law that God had revealed to Abraham, some sort of moral code, or if you will, list. I don't know how or what, but Abram violated it. And so what you have to, and why I say that is we have to be careful not to apply, say, things up to Mount Sinai that came from Mount Sinai. Because it was only at Mount Sinai that law began, right? It was only at the cross that the new law began. So you see my point? Don't like it. I understand. Anything else? Huh? I think so. I think that there is a sense of oughtness that man has, and I think it's further ingrained within us by our parents. Law unto himself, Romans 7, yeah. That's right. That's exactly right. So I think that within all of us, I mean, you see it. You see it in children. There's an oughtness, and that's the word I would use too, but I appreciate the word. There's an oughtness. We ought to do this. We ought to do that. And like I said, I think you see it in children. And then I think it's nurtured by parents and grandparents and neighbors. But I do. I think there's a sense of right and wrong that we all have. My son had a tremendous, still does, but has a tremendous sense of right and wrong. And he didn't mind telling you about it. They knew immediately. That's right. That's right. That's right. Right. And their eyes were, but it says, and their eyes were open and they wouldn't hid themselves. Right. Right. So here's the here's the argument. One of the arguments that's used for the existence of God is what's called the morality argument, which is that man has an oughtness about him, a right or wrong. And think about it this way. When I worked at the factory, and I told you about before I came here, there were folks that didn't go to church there that I worked with. But some of their morals were not good, but some of them were very high. And I was always convinced that if I went and told them, hey, I need X dollars because my wife's having surgery, I might do better there than I would at church. Because those guys, they believed in giving to help, but they didn't go to church. Where did they get that from? Well, it's sort of a moral altness, morality, if you will. Man has that. So yes, I think so. And so the argument then for the existence of God is man has this moral altness about him. And because of that, you have to ask, where did it come from? Well, it had to come from somewhere. It had to come from a higher being. Translation, it came from God. Anything else? All good. All excellent. Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. 65. Yeah, because there's 10 years difference in she and Abraham. Because when God tells Isaac, because she says that she's 90 and he's not. Well, he was 99. So yeah. So I've always thought of 10 years difference. So yeah. Beauty at an age. Which just says that when we tell you ladies you're beautiful, we mean it. We mean it. We mean it. I told my wife that this morning. She rolled her eyes at me. Oh, well.
What would you do about the fact that you think that we have this sense of collectively, but not always individually, obviously, because some people don't have it at all.
Has to be trained.
You have some children that I've read that they can almost identify them as sociopaths when they're 3 years old.
Yeah.
They have no empathy for anyone else.
Right.
One kid is screaming, crying like their head's on fire, and the other one's just sitting there playing like it doesn't bother them at all.
That's right.
And they follow those kids, and they don't always do bad things, but they usually go backwards when people do really bad things, and they are sociopaths. So it seems like we have that in us, and we use it collectively. You know, we create our laws and what's acceptable, what's not collectively, but it doesn't go back just to every individual.
Right. It's.
I don't think everybody's playing the same deck.
Not everybody has to start on the same thing.
Exactly. Yeah, it's all in what we nurture, what we feed and what we're willing to feed. But yet it still goes back to let's think about several scenarios, if you'll let me do that for a minute. It goes back to several things. Think about two children raised in the same house, same parents, same bloodlines from the standpoint of their natural children. Okay? And they're as different as daylight and dark. I mean, one's very moral, one's amoral, has very, very few morals. Same, they had everything the same. Nothing was different. How do you explain it? Well, it's part that within them. But it's that part that they feed. There's a really good bulletin article I think came out in River Road Church Bulletin here past week that talked about, which are you, good or bad? Well, it depends on the wolf that you feed. I don't know who wrote that, but he's a pretty smart guy. But that was all tongue in cheek, folks. That was not. That's one of those things that when we get in my car today, if my wife hears about that, she'll say, "I wish you had said that." So but then go to the point of there's some folks that were raised with a lot of means, well off financially, and they are immoral. But there are folks that didn't have anything were raised very poorly, and they are very moral. So it's not where we think, it's not what we think, but it is what we develop and what we have developed within us. You say, well, it's not just ourselves. That's right. It's what's around us as well, and what we choose to put around us and put in our lives. That's important. Now, you may agree or disagree. That's some of my psychology training coming out in me, but that's where I am with it. Anything else?
It seems like we developed that when we were in a community.
Sure.
Right? When you form a community, it's when, even all the way back in the New Testament, in the Old Testament, God gave the Ten Commandments. He was giving that to that whole group.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I really wonder if I don't know how you do it, but if a person was completely in isolation, would they develop it at all? What would they be parallel?
You need to have morals, y'all think that? Sure, that's not.
Well, now.
Until you happen upon the community, it didn't work out.
But then you might have wrong.
Okay. Well, then we get into a question: the treatment of animals. Well, there's levels and on different things. So you have to stop and ponder those things. The saying, the African saying that it takes a village. It takes a village. It is a village. We need to be very careful. And I was always very proud of my wife as a school teacher because she taught, and she taught from a godly perspective without crossing the line as being a preacher's wife preaching to kids. And sometime, and you won't take much, ask her about the first child she caught stealing. Suzanne was in her first year of teaching school. And so, when you're in your first year of anything, you're very naive, but you're also very green and you haven't come across these things. Just ask her, but bring your lunch because it'll take a while. But, she had some kids too that had parents in jail that they were very good kids. And of course, like she said, she had some that had parents in jail and they were something else. So it's important that we make sure that we surround ourselves. That's why Paul said in 1 Corinthians 15:33 that evil companionships corrupt good manners, good morals. So we have to be very careful. Anything else? Well, I was hoping to get through the 14th chapter. So I hope we're not grading speed on this. Anything else, though? Sometimes quality is better than quantity. Okay. Not a problem. Well, we'll stop right there. Let me give you a 3-point thing. When faith falters, and Abraham seemingly his faith faltered, what did he do? Well, first of all, he realized, we must realize that faith matures through challenging circumstances. When our faith falters, like Abraham's faith did here, understand that our faith grows through challenges, and that's true. Think about it. How do you build muscle? You go to the gym and work out. Faith, how do you do? Challenging circumstances will grow our faith. Secondly, realize that fear is a great enemy of faith. Why did they concoct the lie? He was afraid. And then thirdly, understand and remember, and this really carries us into the 13th chapter, remember the faithfulness of God. God was there. God took care of him. God told Pharaoh, this is wrong. Straighten this out. And so Abraham or Pharaoh did, and Abraham and Sarah were reunited. And so we need to remember those things. Sometime maybe we'll preach that as a sermon. Anything else? Appreciate you. I appreciate your wisdom. I appreciate your study habits. And so just read the 13th chapter, and we'll try to get 13, 14 next week. And if we ease into 15, no, we won't. Let's don't kid ourselves. We'll get through 13 and 14. Y'all have I'll tell you what, let's bow right quick. Our Father in heaven, we're thankful for this day, thankful for the blessing of it, thankful for the beautiful sunshine, thankful that you love us, that you watch over us, that you care for us. And we ask now that you be with us, that you bless us and keep us and hold us within your hand. For this is our prayer in Christ's name. Amen. Thank y'all. Y'all have a great week. Yes.